There you go.
All right. Well, hello. My name is Steve Jones. I'm currently the superintendent at Little Falls Community Schools. If y'all know where Little Falls is, 2 hours and 45 minutes from here. So my route to the superintendency was a tad rare. I didn't start teaching until I was 38 years old. I was in the business world and radio and TV before then, and decided I wanted to go back to college. And my original degree was from Southwest, and so I came back here to Southwest in 1996, and in 2 years got all my teaching stuff and speech and language arts and Spanish major, and was fortunate enough to come out and get a job at the age of 38 in Tracy, actually. I was there for 5.5 years. In the meantime, went back to college to get my master's at University of South Dakota to get my administrative license. Became a principal 3 days after I graduated from USD at Maple River over by Mankato. I was there for 1.5 years, and then 4 years at Murray County Central as the superintendent and high school principal. I got there a year after Mrs. Bonstetter decided to leave. I think she knew I was coming and didn't want to work for me. I was there for 4 years. Previous 3 years, from now I was the superintendent at Sibley East School District, which is Arlington, Gaylord, Green Isle, up by the cities. And I began the job at Little Falls just this July. I still teach here at Southwest. I love the teaching. So I do an adjunct speech communications class here on Wednesday nights. So I drive 2 hours and 45 minutes one way to come and teach, and then turn around and go back at the end of the night. And I do it because I love it. I flat out love it. And so I give you that little bit of historical. For you as 22, 23-year-olds, as I look across, I assume most of you are in that age group, realizing that you will be entering a very competitive market. If you keep up on the legislature, and I hope you will, and I'll be quizzing you on that in just a little bit, I think you'll find that Minnesota and all states are doing everything they can to get older, veteran people involved in education. It's why the federal government and many states are looking to pass rules, to have laws, to have non-educated, people that don't go through the education classes like you, be able to teach. Because they're thinking that with age comes experience and better teaching. I disagree. I don't think that's the way to go. However, that's who you're competing against. And so as you're 22 and 23 years old, you better sober up. And you better find out that if you want a job, there's a lot of things that you need to do besides just walk across the stage. And you need to start doing that, and you should have been doing it for the last 4 years, getting yourselves ready. And that's what today's all about. That's what I'm here to tell you. As a guy who sits in on probably 100 or 150 interviews in the course of the year, I can tell you almost across the board within 90 seconds whether that person gets the job or not. When I walked in here today, I had a very disfavorable impression of a number of you, quite frankly. And you think that it doesn't matter, but it does. Because your actions become habitual. And the way that you treat people become the way that you're perceived. And so many people don't get a job because they walk into a school, and you know who the first person they meet is? The secretary. And guess what? Every secretary has the link to the hiring team. And that secretary makes a report at the end of every interview on what kind of person you really are. The person that sat in the chair and waited. Did you talk? Did you engage the cafeteria or the secretary? Did you greet the custodian when he or she came into the office? Did you look up to the kids when they walked in? Or did you just sit there with your nose buried in a paper? Those are the things that we look for. And so when I walked in here today and I greeted you, one of you said something in response to me. And so immediately you turned me off, quite frankly. So a little challenge for you today, that it is important. And I'm not asking you to be fake. I'm not asking you to invent who you are. But what you need to do is make sure that if this is indeed what you want to do, that it becomes who you are. That it becomes the part of you that doesn't start at 7 in the morning and end at 3 in the afternoon. That's not what we're after for teachers. We're after teachers who live it and breathe it. And when they're done with the day, they go home to their families. We want that as well, but we want them to be a teacher all the time, and that they respect and take care of the district that they're working for. And so as 22 and 23-year-olds, I can ask that of you. I hope I can ask that of you, or you won't make it past the interview process. And so today, we're going to talk a lot about that. The job market today, if you're a teacher, is way different than it was 30 years ago. This is not your parents' job market. If your parents are teachers, what you will go through to get a job is vastly different than they did. Many of your parents, if they're teachers, or many people my age who started in education 30 years ago, never really went through a formal interview to get the job. If they had the right documentation, they were basically offered the job. There were some interviews, but only in the highly competitive areas. A lot of jobs were offered over the phone, even here in Minnesota. Right now, being from Minnesota gives you an advantage. You can get a job over the phone in California, Texas, Arizona, right now. As a Minnesota graduate, you can get a job without having to go there and interview. In a lot of the smaller districts that are really begging for teachers. Minnesota has a reputation as being producing kids that come out that are high character kids. They know that our graduation standards are tougher than a lot of states, and so you end up with kind of a leg up. But you're going to states that don't value education the way that we do here in Minnesota as well. Arizona right now, you can get a job, but it's an awful tough place to teach. Real tough place to teach. We've posted jobs online this year. More than half of our applicants are out-of-state applicants for a job in central Minnesota. And it's because they want to get out of the state that they're at. So right now, jobs in Minnesota are at a premium. And you have to work and you need to convince that you're the best for that job. So this is not your parents' job market. On top of it, districts are cutting budgets. I mean, it's a simple fact. 88% of a district's budget is people. That's just the way it is. It's not books, it's not bus costs, it's not fuel. That's the 12%. 88% of the cost is you. And so you better be worth that 88%. And guess what? If you need to cut, those are the easier things to cut. And right now, Minnesota schools are in that mode. However, can you tell me what happened yesterday at St. Paul? Anybody know what took place yesterday in St. Paul, which is of huge importance to the state of Minnesota education, K-12? Anybody know? You should. As people going out into the education, you better know what's going on in St. Paul. Because yesterday, they passed a $550 million House, the House passed a $550 million K-12 omnibus education bill, which is the best news for Minnesota in over a decade in terms of finance for the state of Minnesota. Anybody know what they've been debating?
I know that I heard something like that they're going to give the schools back the money that they took.
Yep, they're going to pay back the House version. The House version will pay back the $880 million yet that they owe schools. That's one piece of it. The Senate piece does not include that. The Senate will debate theirs later on this week. Anything else? There's a couple of big pieces that are hugely important for schools. All day, everyday kindergarten. Huge piece. Anybody know much about all day, everyday kindergarten? Right now in the state of Minnesota, 58% of the kids in Minnesota have access to all day, everyday free kindergarten. The other 42% pay or do not have the opportunity for all day, every day, are only allowed in their district half-time. Why don't schools offer all day, every day for everybody? Well, simple fact, you guys, is a kindergartner is only valued at 61%. So for a kindergartner, schools only receive 61% of the money for that child if they're going to an all-day, everyday kindergarten. Most schools have decided to eat that cost and have kids go all day, every day. Well, you think about that. That 39% that schools aren't getting paid, that's what the House version of the bill passed. For schools to get that 39% of a kindergarten cost that they've been eating for all these years. For Little Falls, it's about $350,000 a year. That's huge for a district our size. So you can imagine what it's like for Minneapolis. You can imagine, we're about the same size as Marshall. So it's about the same dollar amount. Well, that's an awful lot of teacher jobs. Those are some positive news for the state of Minnesota. The other thing that took place yesterday in the House bill was a 2% increase on the student formula. Do you know what the student formula is? The student formula is the dollar amount that the state of Minnesota pays school districts for educating kids each year. So right now it's a little bit of over $5,400. So a 2% bump is about $110 a year for each kid that we educate. Well, again, for Little Falls, that's about a $250,000 bump. So all of a sudden, things are looking a lot better for us financially. After years and years and years of the state not taking care of schools. All of a sudden this year it looks like schools are finally going to be taken care of. Not exorbitantly, but positively. As educators coming out, you guys, these are the things that you need to be aware of. Because it influences where you may apply for a job. Okay, as you start looking for jobs, the worst thing for you is to get a job in a district that's in the mood of cutting. Because chances are you're going to have a difficult time maintaining that job. And so as you seek jobs, sometimes you take what's out there, I get that. But you may want to target districts that are in good financial shape. And of course, through the beauty of the internet, there's an awful lot of ways for you to find that out yourselves. So I challenge you, quite frankly, to take more of an interest in the business of education. Okay, you kind of get wrapped up in just learning about education when you're in school. What you need to do is really be aware of the business of education because it influences you, it impacts you greatly. And I urge you to do that. So my hope is that you take some interest over the next couple of weeks. It's a really exciting time at St. Paul. Really exciting time for education. For you to understand what this means for schools in Minnesota to have the legislature finally view us in a positive way. So those are just a couple of highlights. I think you'd be interested if you went in and actually looked at the bill at some of the things that they're mandating. The anti-bullying. It'll cost schools $26 million in the state of Minnesota to put in the anti-bullying bill. That's a lot of money. The teacher evaluation plan, that's going to be mandatory. When you get a job, you will be under a new format of teacher evaluation, where 35% of your evaluation will be based on your kids' test scores. Let me repeat that for you to have you sink in. 35% of your evaluation will be on how your kids do on state-mandated tests. And that's an unfunded mandate that's going to cost schools about $30 a kid to put in. So at Little Falls, it's $75,000. It's going to cost us to evaluate you in a different format than we're already evaluating you. We already evaluate you, but not according to the legislators. So they're going to mandate us to spend $75,000 to evaluate you, and part of that's going to be $35 based off your kids' test scores. Kind of scary. Scary if you're a special ed teacher, right? Scary if you're a Phi Ed teacher. Really scary if you're a math teacher, teaching low-level math kids. True? But these are some of the things that you need to be aware of as you come out and are applying for jobs. You might want to look at districts that are doing well test score-wise for your benefit. Those are some things. Or if you like the challenge, you might want to be that person that comes in. We're going to talk a little bit more about this too as we go on. Do you know what's happening with your union? You know, you guys will all be union members, right? Ed Minnesota? You guys are familiar much with Education Minnesota? 70,000 members in Education Minnesota. They dictate your contracts. They dictate your policies. They dictate to the tune of about, what, $60 a paycheck. I think out of your check goes right into Education Minnesota to lobby on your behalf.
They actually are all members of the student program. So the EMSP that you're all members of,
yep.
That's Education Minnesota.
Becomes the union.
Yep.
Actually, this weekend is a huge thing for Ed Minnesota. They're actually, Tom Dooher has been the president of EdMin for the last 2 terms, and he's being challenged by somebody with a completely different philosophy than he. And so at their assembly, their member assembly this weekend, the vote will be on the floor as to who becomes the new president of EdMin. And if Miss Swift, I think her name is, wins, it's going to be a huge philosophical change for the union. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens. But again, as upcoming teachers, that's your union. You need to be aware of those kinds of things that are going on because it does really affect you as you move forward. That's kind of the big, broad challenge for you guys, okay? And please don't feel like you're the only ones who are a little ignorant of what's going on. At Little Falls, we have over 200 teachers. And this year, since I've been there, every week now I send out a legislative update to them. It's amazing how little they knew about what was going on. But now that I've sent out this weekly legislative update, guess what? All of a sudden, they've started to really take an interest in it. We actually have had our state senator and representative come to our school because our teachers have asked questions. They've sent them to me, I've sent them on to the representatives. The representatives have come to the schools and asked our teachers their thoughts, which is exactly what it should be happening. And so it's finally nice to see that. And so our teachers all of a sudden feel like they're a part of the process again. For so long, at St. Paul, if you ask questions, you sometimes get put off and you don't feel like you're a part of the process. Our teachers feel that they're a part of it because they've read what I've been sending them and taking the opportunity to interact with their legislators. I think that's a big piece of where you're at, okay? But that's down the road after you get the job. First of all, we got to get you the job, right? So that's what we're here to talk a little bit about. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think you need to bring to the table for an interview? What do you need? What do I feel as the interviewer you need to come to the table? Okay, first of all, technology. I don't care where you're at, what school you're going to, what district. All districts will ask you a technology-oriented question. Okay, Little Falls, where I'm at, Sibley East, where we left, both of our schools are iPad schools. So at Little Falls, grades 5 through 12, every kid has an iPad. At Little Falls, or at Sibley East, where I came from last year, all kids 5 through 12, and then every kid shares an iPad K through 4 with another kid. So multiple iPads. So you need to know. You need to know what you're doing technology-wise. Because a lot of schools, during the interview process, are asking you to do something technology-wise. They're also asking you to do something in your discipline as well, to present a little bit of a lesson. So those are things that you need to be prepared for ahead of time. But absolutely, positively, you need to stress technology in your letters, in your resumes, whatever you do. You must stress technology. And not that technology will replace what you're doing, but you have to do it in a way that it augments what you are doing as a teacher. You're starting to see, especially in some of the more elective areas, a lot of reference to STEM. So you're seeing a lot of cross-discipline things going on. Right now, we're advertising for an industrial tech position that's going to have a STEM piece to it. So we're looking for a shop guy who has math and science because we're seeing the movement go that way. We're close to Central Lakes College up in Brainerd. Right now, Brainerd does not have enough graduates for the jobs that they have available. So graduates from our 2-year college at Central Lakes are getting jobs. It's 99.8% placement right now. And we're not talking $6.50 an hour jobs. We're talking $22, $24, $26 an hour jobs coming out of Brainerd that they don't have enough bodies for. And so as a school district, right, like a lot of school districts, 6-8 years ago, 10 years ago, we jumped into the challenge courses. We jumped into the college and the schools courses and did a great job with that at the expense of the shop classes, at the expense of the hands-on classes. And now it's coming back around to hurt schools. And so districts and staff like yourself that have opportunities to demonstrate on your resumes that you have opportunity, if you're an English teacher, that maybe you have some experience doing some things in the summertime with your hands, that you're willing to do some things that demonstrate a math curriculum in your English as you're going through. You're trying to tie cross-discipline things together. You need to start stressing those kinds of things. I want you to start thinking about how you can make your resume look different than anybody else's. That's one of the key areas that people are looking for things to do. If you're a Phi-Ed teacher, how can you use math in Phi-Ed? Well, there's hundreds of ways that you can do this. So if you're asked to do a Phi-Ed lesson during your interview, what are you going to come up with? You're going to come up with a lesson that incorporates math or science into your Phi-Ed lesson to demonstrate to the interview team that you get cross-discipline instruction. if you're an elementary English teacher, or if your lesson's going to be on English, you're going to bring in some science piece of that. To do that cross-discipline, to understand, to demonstrate to the interviewers that you get the broad picture. You're just not dealing with your own topic area. You understand the whole child. That's a huge piece of what we look for in interviews. Let's see. Other things that you definitely want to, if you have experience or if you haven't had experience, you want to try and get some things. Anything with minorities. Okay? Anything with ELL, English language learners, English as a second language, anything. Even if it's working in a camp, even if it's working in if you're student teaching in a district that's 30 or 40% minority population, volunteer after school as you do your student teaching. To volunteer with a group after school, so you can put that on your resume as understanding the need for extra time with ESL kids, and that you have the capacity to demonstrate that. If you have a second language, find some experiences that you can put onto your resume that demonstrate you understand that ability to communicate in a language beside English. Those are important things that you need to do. Anything special education. Again, as you're doing your, whether you're a special ed minor or not, and if you're not, I would have highly urged you 3 years ago to get a special ed degree, because those are where the jobs are right now. Anything special ed is out there right now. But if you're not, volunteer. Get some things. Write into your letter, your cover letter, or into your resume, experiences that you volunteered to work with children in need. Anything that you show up on your resume that you do that is a huge plus for you. If you're a Phi Ed teacher, get your DAPE licensure. Holy Toledo. There aren't a lot of Phi Ed teachers with DAPE. And right now there are schools that are paying big bucks for DAPE from another district to drive somebody there to do a couple hours of DAPE a week because they don't have it. So get your adapted Phi Ed if you possibly can, or at least work on it after you graduate. Continue that education piece. What you do in the summer matters. What you do in the summer matters. If you have a job opportunity in education versus working at Burger King, try to take that education job. It matters that you have opportunities in the summertime that look good on your resume as we're really pouring over those resumes. Far and away the most important two pieces in your job interview or in your job application is your resume and your cover letter. Absolutely, to me, the two most important pieces. Your transcripts are probably about third for most people. Some superintendents get really tied up, especially in math, science, English, on grades. A lot of others will get tied up on what's beneath that person with the 3.6 or 3.4 or 3.2. Obviously, we don't want 1.8s, but anything in that 3 range with additional experiences is better than a 3.8 with really not much else to show for it. So look at those things. Extracurriculars, okay? And again, we're going to talk about this more in a little bit here. If whatever you can do extracurricular-wise. If you're not an athlete, so be it. Then look at fine arts. If you're not fine arts, figure out on the school what clubs they offer and what clubs you'd be willing to be an advisor for. Talk about after-school tutoring programs, that you'd be more than willing to stay and run a tutoring program, that you'd look at doing a Saturday school for kids, that, whatever you feel comfortable with, but something that demonstrates you're different than the other applicants. And of course it has to be genuine. You can't do that for a year and then tank it. But you have to make it seem genuine. But my hope is, as youth coming into education, that it's a passion. That this is more than a vocation for you, that it's an avocation. That this is what you want to do and you've wanted to do it for a long time. And this is who you want to be defined as. And if you look at it that way, then there's opportunities for young teachers who really want to be that impactful person in kids' lives. You have that opportunity, and it's a fantastic feeling to be that person that makes the difference for kids. Get your bus driver's license, or at least be willing to do a Type 3. The Type 3 are those smaller vans. Districts are trying to conserve money anywhere we can. So we have coaches who drive. Our cross-country coaches drive their kids to meets because the thought of renting a bus and paying a bus driver to go to a meet 55 miles away probably costs us about $220 a day. Well, you do 6 or 7 meets, and all of a sudden it's a couple of grand that we can save by having a bus driver who is also a coach do those things and kind of double dip, yes. But again, it's helping out the organization, which is a great thing to say. So if you have those kinds of abilities, make sure that that's communicated. And then a huge piece that you're really seeing a change, I think, in the last 20 years. And of course, you can't be asked this in a question or in an interview, but you certainly can offer the information, is where are you going to live? Are you going to live in the district? That is a huge, huge piece. And again, they won't ask you that, but there's no law against you volunteering that information, that you intend to live in the district, that you are looking for housing as soon as you would be offered the job in the district. And then what you'd be interested in getting involved in the community. You cannot underestimate the power of your presence somewhere as a school teacher. People know who you are, way more than the guy who works at the downtown store, at the factory, or as a salesman on the road. You as a school teacher wear a certain badge as somebody who people find approachable, will communicate with you, will ask you questions that you would never ask of somebody, but they'll ask you because you're a school teacher. And they'll recognize you and they'll seek you out. And it only adds to your ability to be able to do that if you live in the community. And they connect with you, and it makes your job easier in the long run by being that person who's viewed as somebody who's really invested in that town, in that district, paying taxes in that district, in a sense helping pay for your own job. So I think those are important pieces. So again, these are just advice pieces from the old man sitting up here. But it's important. As I've been in 5 different school districts over the last 15 years, I can tell you that it matters. It really does matter how these things happen. So questions at this point? Anything that's piqued your interest, that's ticked you off, thrown you for a loop, made you think, made you decide you want to be a business major? If so, yes?
With special ed, a lot of people say when you get a job in special ed, you can't get out. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, we always talk a lot about the fit, about where you're going to be. Okay, so what ends up happening at most districts, if you prove yourself to be a solid special education teacher, and you have a relationship built with your principal and the superintendent through that, they'll work with you. They'll know that you've done your time in a sense, and give you the opportunity. If you demonstrate that that's the district you want to be in, they will help you get there. Again, those are great questions for you to ask during the interview. I really believe that. At the same time, don't do what some have done is get a job in special ed, move into an elementary teaching position, and immediately drop their special ed license. Because that demonstrates that you're probably not a person full of integrity, that you'd be able to, that you do that. Because occasionally districts will need to change some things as well, and it comes back to the greater good of the organization sometimes. But you're right. I mean, do you use it to get a job and then get out of it? It kind of goes both ways. So tough question, but my hope is that because I've had that opportunity, and we've changed people out of special ed because we cared about the person. We really want you to be a part of the family. That's how we approach it. So let's talk about job postings. Okay, just in the last couple of years, it's really changed. So EdPost, still probably the best place in Minnesota to look for jobs. MASA has a lot of jobs on it, but a lot of districts have gone through EdPost using an applet track system, which is really an automated system online. And so we started using it earlier this year, and it's pretty amazing what ends up happening. So it's all done electronically. So all of your things are put in electronically. But for you as the applier for jobs, you can take your packet and move it to another job pretty easily. So you're not doing what we had to do, which was mail out multiple packets. Now it's all done electronically, which is really good for you. So in our district right now, like I said, we have social studies. We opened it up last week. So through, today is Wednesday, through 4 days, we're at 29 applications already in a middle school social studies position. This past summer, we had 6 elementary positions open. We got 142 applications for it. So I don't say that to scare you. What I say it is for you to understand who you're competing against. And you're not competing against all newbies. A lot of these are veteran teachers who are looking to move, who are looking to, through a family situation, move on, but a lot of them are new teachers. And so what you have to do is realize that when you put together your resume, it needs to have some teeth to it. It needs to be more than an afterthought. It needs to really be able to jump and grab people's attention. The cover letter to me is far and away the most important piece that is so often neglected by applicants. So I know, I mean, I have read enough cover letters to know that the people who apply just change the name on the top and send in the same letter to the same schools. I mean, I know that, because some haven't even changed the names. So I'll get things addressed to Mr. Jones for the Perham School District, or I'll get things addressed to Mr. Smith for the Little Falls School District. So things just aren't being changed. And what you're doing is just taking your philosophy of education, which I think needs to appear in a cover letter, throwing it in there and sending it off. And it really doesn't say much at all, to be quite honest with you. And so as the guy from Little Falls reading these cover letters, I want to believe that you think Little Falls would be a pretty cool place to work. I want to know that you've actually done some investigation on Little Falls. I think you should know something about my school before you apply. I think that with the internet, it's awful easy to find that. And let me give you some examples. So if you're an English teacher, right? If you're not worried about MCA scores as an English teacher, you need to be doing something else. Because right now, that's how our kids are assessed. Well, the MCA scores are available all over the Minnesota Department of Ed website. You can get in there, parents can get in there, students can get in there. But it still appalls me how few, basically none, of applicants will talk about test scores. So I want to know, I mean, I know where our test scores are at. I want to know how you're going to impact our test scores. What are you going to do for me besides telling me in your cover letter that you can motivate kids? Oh, everybody says they can motivate kids. What's going to make you different? How are you going to motivate my kids to improve their test scores? What are you going to tell me in the cover letter? Because you can't show me that in the resume. You can't show me that in your transcripts. Where are you going to tell me that? You're going to tell me that in the interview? Well, guess what? You're competing against 45 other people. How do you know you're even going to get an interview? The cover letter has to be your pre-interview. Without sounding preachy, your cover letter has to sell me that you're worthy of an interview. And by telling me the same drivel, that I hear from the other 40 English applicants doesn't do me any good. So I want to know that you've researched my school. I want to know that you know what we do well, but what we don't do well. And what you're going to do to help me do those things that we don't do well better. That's what I need to hear from you. Otherwise, you guys, you're never going to get an interview. You're going to have a hard time getting an interview. For us to hear from you how you're going to do that. Because that's what you've been studying for 4 years.
So would you recommend telling about yourself as well in your cover letter?
I think you have to do it, but you have to back it up with how. Okay? So what you do is, all you're doing right now with the basic letter, cover letter, is telling me. You need to show me. Okay? Tell me, but show me. Okay? And part of that is just me understanding that you have an awareness of what our needs are. I don't get that when I read about your basic philosophy. I don't get that, you know? Some of you go in and you talk about your student teaching experience, right, in your cover letter. Well, you know, okay, I get that, but I want to know how that student teaching experience is going to equate to helping me at Little Falls. Do you know what I mean? Rehashing what you did at the Marshall Middle School doesn't help me at Little Falls, because guess what? My needs are different than the Marshall Middle School needs. And so your skills have to line up to what I need. Okay? So, let's see, what else? I talked about English, let's talk about Fayette. Okay? Right now, Morrison County, right, which is where Little Falls is, we're 82nd out of 87 counties in Minnesota in terms of health. We are a very unhealthy county. 82nd out of 87. That's not good, right? We're also 45% free and reduced, right? And you guys all know that free and reduced rates equal socioeconomics, equal obesity, right? There's that whole line that goes along, right? So if you're a Fayette teacher and you do any kind of research on Little Falls or Morrison County, guess what you're going to find? That we're a really unhealthy county. And so I want to know that you know that right now in Little Falls there's a big movement going on to change that. So, I mean, wouldn't that just make me happy as a Little Falls superintendent to read how you're going to help our community combat our obesity problem, our youth diabetes problem, instead of telling me that you're committed and dedicated to kids? Tell me, show me how you're dedicated and committed to kids. Those are the things I need to hear, right? We're starting a garden project at Little Falls, 2 acres. We're planting this spring. We're partnering with the nuns, if you want to believe that. The Franciscan Sisters of Little Falls, and we're planting a 2-acre garden on their convent. And all the food is coming back into our cafeteria. And we're going to have salad bars at all of our elementaries, all of our middle schools and our high schools. Full salad bars, because of the whole healthy kick that we're really trying to get our kids to buy into. Right? So as a Fayette teacher or a health teacher or any teacher, honestly, I mean, that's just a huge piece that you can throw into a cover letter to prove that you've researched my school. That's what I want to know, that you've given me the time of day so I can give you the time of day for an interview. Does that make sense? And that cover letter can do that for you. And you can do it in a page and a half. You can make your cover letter a page and a half if it's interesting. If it's just repetitive dribble, no. It needs to be short and get out. But I challenge you to really research the schools that you apply for, to find out what their needs are and how you specifically are going to impact those needs for us as a district. Then I think you've got a chance to come in and demonstrate that you can be that person to do it. Okay? And of course it follows through at the elementary level. I mean, all those scores are posted. You know where our needs are. You can find that out. It's easy. So that's what I challenge you to do. Letters of reference. Make sure that they're gender equal, that they're age group equal, that they're not all professors from SMSU, that they're across the board. Also that they're not all your student teacher supervisors. You need to have a broad range of letters of reference. Okay? But certainly the male-female thing, it's amazing how often that does not happen. Yes?
Does it matter how many you have?
What I would do is I would send 4 to 6 and then put more available upon request. Okay? But most will tell you 3, send 4 to 6. And that's okay. Because you know what ends up happening, especially if they're in the education world, eventually you're going to connect with somebody, as a superintendent, I know an awful lot of people. Well, if you send me a letter from an educator, chances are I might know that person. And guess what I'm going to do then? I'm going to call that person up and I'm going to talk to him personally because I got a packet from you. Okay? So the more the better, but don't overload us. Appearance, really important. I mean, I hope you have your A game on when you come in. I really do, because you need to. You need to come in. You all took fundamentals of public speaking, right? Here at SMSU. Unfortunately, you didn't have me. But what you should look at from that course that you take into your interview is the persuasive speech. Because all an interview should be is a persuasive speech. You need to make sure that you practice the words that you are going to use during your interview. And they can't be words that are subjective, words that are unequivocal, words that don't really have a strong meaning to them. You need to use strong words. You need to use words like need and must and should. Words that demonstrate that you are committed, that you're dedicated, that you're passionate, that you have a clue where you're going. Don't use words that allow the interviewer to think that you're kind of wishy-washy, to allow the interviewer to think that, you really could bend either way. Depends on which way the wind blows. At the same time, you can't come in arrogant or hard-headed. There's a fine line to that, right? Especially as you look at persuasive speeches, right? Persuasive speech, you are trying to convince somebody to your way of thinking without offending them. And that's how an interview has to go. You have to get them to be convinced that you're the best person, but at the same time that you're a collaborator, that you're a team player, that you're using all those 21st century skills that we talk about, right? Communication, organization, problem solving, decision making, all those kinds of things that you use during your interview. By the way, those are keywords for you to use in your 21st century, or during your interview. You should write down the 10 or 15 ideas of 21st century learners and make sure you use every single one of those in your interview in some time. Okay, I'm serious. Critical thinking, problem solving, all those themes need to be a part of your interview. Not 15 of them in a row. You're interspersing them throughout. But make it part of your vernacular, your lexicon. That's who you are. Those words have meaning to you besides just something that's been drilled into your head. Okay? Those are the tactics that you approach. You need to practice getting ready for an interview. You need to be prepared. You can't go out on a bender the night before an interview. You just can't. You're not going to be at your A game. Great story. I interviewed for a job in Lake City. And I was standing out in front with the superintendent, and the board members were coming in as they were filing in to do the interview. And on my drive over to Lake City, which is all the other end of the state, I had researched the school, and so I was memorizing the names of the board members. And one of the board members' name was Andrea Hamilton. I'll never forget the story. And as I'm standing there in the lobby of the school, board members are coming in, and the superintendent says to the board member, "Hi, Andrea." And so okay. So she goes in and goes into the interview room, and I go in, and first question, ironically, she asks, and I just said, "Well, thank you, Andrea," and proceeded to answer the question. And I got done with the question, and she just said, "Well, two things." She says, "First of all, that was a perfect answer, and secondly, you're one of a handful of people in my entire life who's gotten my name right the first time." And it was all because I listened. I got offered the job, and I know it was because I impressed her simply by knowing how to pronounce her name. And it's because I practiced their names on the way over. So, how does that apply to you as a teacher? Guess what? What stops you from calling up the principal and talking about the job? First of all, it demonstrates that you're really interested in the job. You come up with a question or two that are important to you, make them sound like you're not just calling them to impress him or her, but you call up with legitimate questions about the interview, about the position, and in the meantime, ask who might be on the interview team. Is it appropriate to know who's on the interview team? Is it made up of staff members? Is it made up of teachers? Is it the superintendent? Is it board members? Because guess what? That's going to impact how you approach your interview. Because if it's board members, you're going to probably look at answering the question in a little different focus than if it's English department members or third grade team, if you're interviewing for a third grade team. Your questions, your answers may depend upon who is doing the interview. But those are some things you can do. There's nothing wrong with you taking in a piece of paper, and as people go around and introduce themselves, write down their names. And guess what? Call them by their name during the interview. What that does is it creates an immediate connection with you as a speaker. I mean, that's one of the basic things you're taught in fundamentals of public speaking. The more that you can create common ground, right? Common ground, remember that? Well, in an interview, you have 45 minutes to create an awful lot of common ground. And it's all on you to create it. And so you have to set up those avenues to be able to do just that. And what better way to do it than by name? Those are things that you can easily do. They don't cost you a dime, and all they do is a little bit of your time, and they pay huge dividends for you down the road. It's the same with the high school secretary or the elementary secretary. Know their name. Their name tags are right there. When they introduce them, or you come up and say, I'm here for the interview, call her by name. She'll say who you are. Why can't you reciprocate? It's those kinds of things that are really, really important. And they don't cost you anything to do. It's just common sense. At the same time, I want teachers that do that because guess what? You have 110 kids that I want you to call by name every day. If you're a high school teacher, you have 110 kids. If you're an elementary teacher, you have 30. If you're an elementary phy-ed teacher, you have 400. I want you calling them by name. Right? So do it, learn it with the adults. And guess what? It might not get you this job. Might not get you the next job. But if you do that and you make it a part of who you are, it's going to get you a job. I promise you that. It will. Because that's who we're looking for. We're looking for people who we can honestly create a relationship with, who are genuine people, who care about what they do. They aren't just doing it from 7 to 3 o'clock. Healthy living and wellness. Right now in all of our schools, and not just Morrison County, you're seeing a huge push towards wellness and healthy living. Somehow, during your interview, this has to be somehow you get this involved in a question. Somehow, some way. You need to talk about your healthy life. They always ask you, what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? All those kinds of things. Somehow, some way, you've got to talk about you understanding the capacity of being healthy and well in your life and how it evolves into the lives of your children in the classroom. Because you have to be a model for that, for your kids. You have to be a healthy model living for your kids. We're not quite back at the point in the 10s and the 20s where you couldn't drink in town. Back when Miss Monstetter was teaching. She couldn't drink in Slayton. She had to go to Avoca to have a beer. Obviously, it's changed a little bit now. It's more socially acceptable for teachers to be out and doing those kinds of things. But at the same time, the kids look up to you as somebody that they want to be like. And so my hope is that you take that seriously. It's incredible, you guys. Really incredible for you to understand how those kids look up to teachers. It just blows me away. And there's nothing that makes me angrier as a superintendent than a teacher who doesn't take that seriously, who doesn't appreciate the power that they have in their position. And that whole health and wellness thing is really important because you need to be a guide. You need to be a model for them to live a healthy lifestyle. And so that has really become a big piece of education these days. So I'm asking you to really assess that in yourself and how you take that bit of you and turn that into a positive for you during the whole interview and early teaching process of your lives. All right, we've got about 10 minutes to go, and now it comes up to the fun stuff. So I'm going to ask you questions again, see if you have any more questions, and then we'll get on to the last bit of this. Yes, sir?
I have a resume question.
Yeah.
I've heard that some people, when they're looking through resumes, if they're longer than there's just more than one page, it doesn't matter.
No. If you have enough on there that's meaningful, put it on. If you're just filling up space, we'll see through that as just filling up space. Okay? That's like, that old question, how many words do you want my paper? Well, I want it long enough to tell me what I need to know. And so the same thing with the resume. And it's the same thing with the cover letter. Because it's all electronic now, it's not like you're killing trees anymore. And so that whole business has kind of gone by the wayside of how long they should be. It's kind of changed. Because, it's really interesting because I really sobered up some of our educators, our interviewers, who were complaining about an interview process that I put together, because they're used to doing half-hour interviews to hire a teacher. And I said, you gotta be kidding me. In a half an hour, you're gonna interview a teacher who has 25 or 30 kids, and you're gonna tell me in a half an hour you know that person's the best one. I can't buy that. I'm tired of that. I don't know how you can do that. And so we've changed the way that we do things. Actually, last summer, we did speed dating interview, which was absolutely the best thing I've ever been a part of. I had read about it, and we had 6 elementary interview positions open, so we created speed dating. And so the best part was we had 6 tables with 3 educators at each table. We brought in 12 people at a time. We brought in 24 interviewees. We brought in 12 at a time. So they went in groups of 2. So 2 would go to table 1, 2 to 2, 2 to 3, 2 to 4, and meet with 3 educators, teams of educators. They were all elementary and then the specialists. And after 15 minutes, we'd buzz them and they'd go to the next table. And just go all the way around. It was fascinating. First of all, from an administrator standpoint, we got more teachers involved in interviews than ever had been before, and they loved it. They loved being asked to be a part of it. Secondly, we were able to run 24 potential applicants through. But the best piece of it, and this is why I think it's important for you, is what we saw were potential applicants who couldn't get along with the person sitting next to them. Think about that. We had 6 jobs. So could have been really, these 2 could have been working together. They couldn't even look at each other. They couldn't answer questions together. They were competing against the person sitting next to them. And really they weren't. They were competing against the other 22. And they were supposed to really embrace this person and really become a team, right? Because that's what we talk about now, right? How much of your work getting ready for school is teams, right? Collaborating. And here we gave them the opportunity to collaborate. And there were 2 groups that we thought they were going to have a little hissy fight. It was pretty amazing to watch. Other groups collaborated, and they would answer questions together. They would play off each other. It was really fascinating to watch. And so, again, as we go through interviews, that might be the way that you're interviewed. Who knows? It might be a different type of interview situation, but it was kind of interesting to go through that process. So we'll probably do that again this summer, honestly, with some elementary jobs that we have open because it worked out so well last year. So thanks for the question. Anything else, question-wise, before we get a few more things here and then we'll wrap her up? I know I've been doing an awful lot of talking, but I hope you think it's been worth something. I've seen some head shakes, which I appreciate. So I hope you're getting something out of it. Lastly is kind of some other pieces that I think you need to understand. First of all, social media. I'm the 53-year-old guy who has a Facebook page, who Twitters, who does all those things. But for the life of me, I don't understand why some future educators put on their Facebook pages what they put on. And I think you need to sober up and get those things off. Because the first thing you'll do, especially if you're a high school or a middle school teacher, is after the first day of school, your kids will go home and search you. They will look you up. And then, if you tick off the kids, the parents will start doing it. And then you're going to have some issues. If you have things out on Facebook that are not what should be there. I'm not talking about an occasional F-bomb. I'm not talking about those kinds of things. I'm talking about the drinking. I'm talking about the bong shots. I'm talking about, allusions to drug use and all those kinds of things that are out there. If that's you, do everything in your power today, especially for those of you that are student teaching next fall, and certainly in the spring. Get them off as best you can. Please, for your own sake. I can't even tell you how many times I get a request during the course of a school year from a parent who says, I saw this on Facebook. A lot of it's about our kids, but some of it's about our adults. And that's the most uncomfortable conversation that I have to have with an adult is, do you really think that's what you want your 10th grade literature kid to see of you? That's really not what you need to be doing. As I talked about modeled behavior, I need you to really think about that. Is it fair? No. I'll agree with you. It's not fair. It's your own personal life. I get that. But, it's just every job, every choice we make has sacrifices and has consequences. You've chosen to be a teacher. Don't let a Facebook page be your ruination. Right? Don't hang your pride on that. I think you have other principled steps that you can hang yourself on. Don't do it on Facebook and social media. I ask you, for your own sake, please. These things are great things, but they can be career-ending. Just this year at Wadena Deer Creek, a teacher, totally innocent, was actually going through a weight loss program and took a picture of himself naked, which I don't understand why he did it, but I think in the context of the weight loss, wanted to see the whole thing. It was on his iPad. Wasn't showing it or anything. He left his iPad in a room. A kid found the iPad, and as they had been instructed to figure out whose it was, clicked onto it. The guy didn't have a passcode, so on these things, if it goes dormant, it goes to a passcode, so it doesn't show anything. The kid, trying to figure out whose it was, had another couple friends come over, and they flick through, figure out that it's his by, guess what? The picture. And you can only imagine what's happened since then. The guy's career, 20-year teacher, coach, is basically ruined because of that. And so, these stories are a dime a dozen, unfortunately, about educators, making those innocent, poor choices. We have a case that I've dealt with where we had a community ed coach who was a 20-year-old college student at St. Cloud. Actually, a 21-year-old. She was legal. She was a 21-year-old college student at St. Cloud at a dorm party when two kids from a local school district showed up uninvited. The kids took a picture of themselves at this college party. Didn't know this girl, this coach. The picture went out on the Facebook. Somebody in the community recognized this girl in this picture with a beer in her hand, 21, legal dorm party, but with two high school kids there. All of a sudden, guess what? It blew up. It blew up. And this girl, innocent as the day is long, gets fired from her coaching job. For two kids that she had no connection with, who were uninvited to this party, but because it was out on the media. Right? So, my question is, how can you how do you prevent those kinds of situations? You just have to have that sixth sense about you as a future educator to realize that you can't put yourself into those types of situations, knowingly or unknowingly, anymore. That's the difference between now and when I grew up. When I was here at Southwest the first time. It's just a different world, you guys. And again, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it is what it is. And, we just have to be careful. I don't want those things to happen to you. And so, you have to have that forethought about what really are my choices. What, do I need to be there? Or can I, if it looks fishy, should I get out? I'd rather stay and have a beer with my friends, but maybe this is not the best choice for me. I know, it's an awful lot to ask. But, boy, I know the heartache that this young girl went through. She wishes she'd left. So, we will check. We check your attendance rate. I want you to know that. So, one of the biggest costs to school districts is absenteeism by faculty. We pay $125 a day plus benefits. FICA, Social Security for a substitute teacher. So basically $150 a day. Every time you're gone. That's what it costs the district. Well, I don't want to hire teachers who are going to be gone. I want you healthy and I want you there. It goes back to that wellness piece again, right? So guess what? I'll check your work. If you put down a work reference, I'm going to call. The first question I'm going to ask is, what's his attendance? What's her attendance? Was she there? Did she blow you off occasionally? I'm going to call your high school. I won't call college because they don't release those things. But your high school will. They'll tell me what kind of a student you were in terms of your attendance. Did you come only when you felt you had to come? Those are important things, you guys. And to me, as an administrator, I hire you to be in the classroom with the kids. I want you there with the kids, but then it's also $150 a day that you're costing me on top of what I'm paying you to be absent. So I need you there. So again, those are some things that you talk about during your interview that are important to you, right? That's, you're dependable. You're here. You don't miss school. Through your high school, you missed 5 days. Those are the kinds of things that seem innocuous now, but they're really important. They resonate with administrators as we go through. Understanding what mandated reporting is. As a young teacher, you're really, if you're 22 or 23 when you get your job, you're dealing with 18-year-olds. My wife is 9.5 younger than I am. And so I look at, you guys are only 5 years difference between you and your senior. And so the age thing is really non-existent to that age group. They don't see those boundaries. You have to see those boundaries. You have to see those boundaries. Because they'll come in and they'll tell you things that you don't necessarily want to hear. And you need to set those boundaries up early and often. Because guess what? If they tell you something that you don't want to hear that you heard and you need to report it, because you're a mandated reporter, you need to report it. Or you will go to jail. Point blank, you will go to jail. And so I understand wanting to, create those relationships. I think that's important. But it's really tough for the young teacher to set up those boundaries and to respect them. Not, again, creating relationships, but understanding that if you go past a point and information's told to you, that you, by law, have to share that with your principal. And it becomes an uneasy situation. So my hope is you can get yourself set up ahead of time so you're not in those kinds of situations. That's kind of what I wanted to run through with you guys today. How many are still going to be teachers? Did I scare anybody off? If nothing else, I hope I challenged the heck out of you. I hope I drove home to you that this is a noble profession, you guys. I started teaching, as I said, at 38. I wish, there were a lot of days I wish I'd started earlier, but I'm not sure that if I'd started earlier, I'd have the appreciation for it that I do now, where this is really who I am and it's what I'm all about. And coming here to talk to you guys today, I love doing this, but I hope you understand that what I'm telling you is really the way it is. And sometimes you don't get enough of that when you're going through the academic pieces, but I think you need to understand what you're up against. And, we don't have much room to not hire the best. You always say, when you have your car problems, right? You take them to a mechanic. Do you want the C mechanic? The guy who got C's in mechanic school? You don't ever come in and say, just give me your average mechanic to work on my car. You come in and you say, I want the best mechanic to work on my car. Well, guess what? I want the best teacher to work with my kids. And that's your challenge. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that we always get the opportunity to recognize who the best teacher is because you don't give us a fair enough chance to do that through the lack of attention to your application materials. You need to really take that piece seriously. And that's what I hope, if you get anything out of today, I hope that's what you get out of it. That you actually sit down and you write your cover letter and it means something to you. And you actually sit down and you look at the school where you're applying, and that you find out where they need you and why you would fill their voids. That's what I hope you do. That's what I hope you get out of this. And then I hope you go on and you have a 40-year career that's just absolutely fantastic. That's what I hope for you. So, thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking me to come.